Part 1. The cracks begin to show. I never saw it coming. Looking back, I suppose the signs were there, hidden in plain sight. But love has a way of blinding you to the truth. My name's David, and for the past 15 years, I've been married to Sarah. We met in college, young and full of dreams. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in, and even now, at 38, she hasn't lost that spark. We built a life together, a beautiful home, 2 kids, and countless memories. People always said we were the perfect couple, and for the longest time, I believed it. But perfection is an illusion, a mask that hides the cracks beneath. At first, I didn't think much of the changes. Sarah started paying more attention to her appearance, new clothes, expensive perfumes, makeup she never used to wear. I figured she was just trying to feel good about herself. After all, hitting your late 30s isn't easy, and she had been working hard to stay in shape. We both did, actually. It was our way of keeping things exciting. But then she began smiling more. Not at me, but at her phone. I'd catch her glancing at it, eyes twinkling as she typed away with a grin she couldn't hide. When I'd ask what was so funny, she'd brush it off with a casual, just some silly memes from the girls. It made sense. She was close with her friends, and they were always sharing jokes. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She seemed happier, more energized, almost like she was floating. I wanted to believe that it was just her thriving, feeling good about herself and our life. But doubt started creeping in when she became protective of her phone. It was subtle at first, angling the screen away from me, putting it face down on the table. I told myself it was nothing. After all, who doesn't value a bit of privacy? I never had a reason to distrust Sarah. She was my rock, my partner in everything. If she was keeping secrets, they were probably harmless, I told myself. But the unease gnawed at me, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Then came the nights out. She'd dress up, looking stunning in ways that made my heart race, but it was never for me. Girls' night, she'd say, or work dinner, ILL late. I trusted her. I had to. What kind of marriage would we have if I didn't? One evening, she came home later than usual, her cheeks flushed, eyes sparkling. She was humming a tune I didn't recognize, her body practically vibrating with energy. "You're in a good mood," I remarked, trying to keep my voice light. She laughed, a lilting sound that was both familiar and foreign. "Oh, it was just a fun night. Good company, good food. You know how it is." She leaned in and kissed me, her lips warm but distant. I tasted the wine on her breath, and for a brief moment, I wondered who else had. I pushed the thought away, ashamed of my paranoia. This was Sarah, the woman who vowed to love me forever. She wouldn't betray me. She couldn't. But the unease persisted. I started paying closer attention, noticing things I'd overlooked before. She was on her phone more often, laughing at texts she never shared. Her passwords changed, and when I asked, she claimed it was for security reasons. It made sense, but the pit in my stomach grew heavier. I didn't want to be that husband, the one who snooped through his wife's things, the one who let suspicion poison his mind. So, I convinced myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting. But it was getting harder to ignore the tightening in my chest every time she smiled at her screen. And then there was Ryan, my best friend since high school, the guy who had my back through everything. We were practically brothers. He was charming, funny, and charismatic in ways I never could be. He'd come over often, hanging out like he always did. Nothing unusual, nothing that would set off alarm bells. But then I started noticing how Sarah laughed at his jokes a little too easily, her eyes lingering on him just a moment longer than necessary. I told myself it was innocent, that they were just close because of me. Why wouldn't they be? Ryan was like family. Yet, the unease grew. It felt like I was watching my life through a window, close enough to see but too far to touch. I was losing her, and I didn't know why. I had no proof, just a gut feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, I watched Sarah swipe through her phone, her lips curved into a secretive smile. I wanted to ask who she was texting, to demand answers to the questions burning in my mind. But fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if my insecurities drove a wedge between us? So, I swallowed my doubts and kissed her goodnight, hoping her smile was meant for me. But as she turned away, the light from her phone cast shadows on the wall, dancing tauntingly, whispering truths I wasn't ready to hear. The cracks were beginning to show, but I was too afraid to look closer. Too afraid of what I might find. Part 2. Unraveling Threads. The days blurred together, each one more restless than the last. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, that my suspicions were just shadows of my own insecurities. But the doubts grew louder, whispering in my ear when the house was quiet, echoing through the halls like a haunting melody. Sarah's routine didn't change much, but my perception of it did. Every time she laughed at her phone, my heart sank a little. Every time she dressed up, I wondered who she was trying to impress. And every time she said she was going out, I couldn't help but imagine her with someone else. With him. Ryan. My best friend. I hated myself for even considering the possibility, but the thought was there, festering like a wound that wouldn't heal. They were close, sure, but they had always been close. He was part of our lives, part of our family. But now, every time I saw them together, I noticed things I never did before, the way her eyes sparkled when he spoke, the way she laughed at his jokes even when they weren't that funny. I started paying attention, watching for signs I didn't want to find. And that's when I saw it, the way she would touch his arm when she laughed, the way they shared glances that seemed to carry words they never spoke aloud. It was subtle, but it was there. And it was driving me insane. I tried to push the thoughts away, to remind myself that I was being paranoid. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it consumed me. I found myself replaying every interaction in my head, analyzing every word, every smile, every laugh. I was losing sleep, losing focus. One evening, Ryan came over to watch a game. It was supposed to be just the two of us, but Sarah joined us, laughing and joking like she was one of the guys. At first, I was happy to see her enjoying herself. But then I saw how she leaned into him when she laughed, how he whispered something in her ear that made her cheeks flush. My chest tightened, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the game. I tried to join the conversation, to remind them that I was there too. But I felt like an outsider in my own home, a ghost watching his life slip away. After the game, Ryan stayed to help clean up. Sarah laughed as she swatted him with a dish towel, her eyes dancing with mischief. I forced myself to smile, to pretend that everything was normal, but inside I was screaming. When Ryan finally left, I asked Sarah about it. "You seemed really happy tonight," I said, trying to sound casual. "You and Ryan were really hitting it off." She looked at me, her expression softening. "We were just having fun, David. Don't be weird about it." She kissed my cheek, her lips warm and familiar. But I couldn't help but notice the way she avoided my eyes. I wanted to believe her, to trust her like I always had. But the doubt was there, festering like a poison I couldn't purge. I started watching them more closely, looking for any excuse to prove myself wrong. But all I found were more reasons to worry. Sarah's nights out became more frequent. "Just meeting up with the girls," she'd say, her voice light and casual. But when I asked which friends, her answers were always vague. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I texted one of her friends, Kelly, asking if they were having fun. Kelly's reply was quick and confused. "Fun? I'm at home with the kids. Did Sarah say we were hanging out?" My stomach dropped, my fingers trembling as I typed a quick excuse about miscommunication. I stared at my phone, my mind racing with possibilities. Where was she? Who was she with? She came home that night, smiling and glowing, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "How was girls' night?" I asked, forcing the words out through gritted teeth. "It was great," she replied, her voice a little too cheerful. "We had a blast." She kissed me, her lips soft and sweet, but all I could taste were lies. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her, watching her breathe, my mind spiraling into dark places I didn't want to go. Was she seeing him? Were they laughing at me behind my back? Did she still love me, or was I just a convenience she hadn't figured out how to leave? I felt like I was suffocating, trapped in a web of uncertainty and fear. I needed answers, but I was too afraid to ask the questions. I didn't want to hear the truth, didn't want to face the possibility that my life was built on lies. I started pulling away, retreating into myself to avoid the pain. I stopped asking about her nights out, stopped trying to join in her laughter. I became a shadow, a presence she barely noticed. And that's when I realized how little she noticed. She didn't ask why I was quiet, didn't question why I was distant. She didn't reach out, didn't try to bridge the gap between us. She was too busy texting, too busy smiling at her phone, too busy floating away. I was losing her, and she didn't even care. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay, couldn't keep letting the doubt eat me alive. I needed proof, needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. So, I made a decision. I would follow her, find out where she was really going, who she was really seeing. It felt wrong, felt like a betrayal, but I needed answers. I needed to know if my marriage was already over, or if there was still something worth saving. The next time she went out, I watched her get ready, watched her smile at her reflection as she applied her lipstick. She looked beautiful, radiant, like she did when we first met. I wanted to reach out, to pull her close and beg her to stay. But the words stuck in my throat, heavy with doubt and fear. She kissed me goodbye, her lips lingering just a moment too long, as if she could feel the distance between us. "Don't wait up," she said, her voice soft and playful. "I might be late." I watched her walk out the door, my heart pounding as I grabbed my keys. I followed her, keeping my distance, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know what I was going to find, didn't know if I was ready for the truth. But I couldn't live with the lies anymore. I followed her to a bar, a small, dimly lit place on the other side of town. I watched as she walked inside, her posture relaxed, her smile wide and genuine. She was happy. She was beautiful. And she was meeting someone. My heart shattered as I saw him walk up to her, his arms wrapping around her in a hug that was far too familiar. Ryan. My best friend. My brother. The man I trusted more than anyone in the world. I watched them laugh, watched them touch, watched them fall into each other like they were the only two people in the world. And I felt my world collapse around me. There was no more doubt, no more suspicion, only the cold, hard truth. Sarah was cheating on me, and she was doing it with my best friend. Part 3, Shattered Trust. I don't remember driving home. My hands were numb, my vision blurred by tears I refused to let fall. The world felt distant, hollow, as if I was walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How could this be real? How could Sarah do this to me? I stumbled through the front door, the silence of the house crushing me under its weight. This was our home, the place where we built our lives, shared our dreams. And now it felt like a stranger's house, empty and cold, echoing with memories that meant nothing anymore. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Sarah, laughing and smiling, her body leaning into Ryan like he was her whole world. She looked happier with him than she ever did with me. The thought twisted in my gut, a knife turning slowly, cutting me from the inside out. I replayed every moment in my head, torturing myself with the details. Her eyes lighting up when he touched her, the way they moved together as if they had done it 100 times before. How long had this been going on? How many nights had she lied to my face, kissed me goodbye while she ran off to him? The betrayal was suffocating, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream, to break something, to destroy the pain that was tearing me apart. But all I could do was sit there, paralyzed by grief and disbelief. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my daze. It was Sarah. A simple text that read, "Heading home soon. Love you." I stared at the words, my stomach churning with disgust. How could she say that? How could she pretend like everything was fine, like she wasn't ripping my heart to shreds? I threw my phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. It felt good, just for a moment, to see something break that wasn't me. But the relief was fleeting, replaced by a wave of nausea that left me gasping for air. I couldn't face her. Not yet. I needed time to process, to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I couldn't look at her, couldn't hear her lies, couldn't pretend like I didn't know. Not after seeing them together, so happy, so comfortable, so in love. The word made me sick. Was that it? Did she love him? Was I just a placeholder, a convenience she kept around while she chased something real with Ryan? I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to accept that our marriage was built on lies. But I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I couldn't ignore the truth staring me in the face. I heard her car pull into the driveway, the familiar sound of the engine cutting off, the click of the door closing. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled to my feet, my heart racing. I couldn't be here. I couldn't see her, not yet. I grabbed my coat and slipped out the back door, moving quietly, quickly. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just needed to get away, to put as much distance between us as possible. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring as I sped through the streets. I ended up at a park we used to go to, back when we were young and in love, before everything fell apart. I sat on the swing where she once laughed as I pushed her, her hair flying in the wind, her smile bright and real. I could almost hear her laughter, feel her warmth beside me. But it was just an echo, a ghost of a memory that meant nothing now. She wasn't that girl anymore. And I wasn't the man she wanted. I stayed there for hours, the cold biting at my skin, the darkness wrapping around me like a shroud. I watched the night fade into dawn, the sun rising on a world that looked the same but felt completely different. Everything had changed. Everything was broken. When I finally went home, the house was silent. Sarah was asleep in our bed, her face peaceful, her body curled up under the blankets like she didn't have a care in the world. I stood in the doorway, staring at her, my chest tightening with anger and grief. How could she sleep so easily? How could she lie there, so comfortable, so content, knowing what she was doing to me? I wanted to wake her, to scream at her, to demand answers. But the words wouldn't come. I was too raw, too shattered. So I turned away, leaving her in her dreams, untouched by the nightmare she had created for me. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I spent the day going through the motions, pretending like everything was normal. I made coffee, cleaned up the broken phone, went to work. But I felt like a zombie, hollow and empty, moving through the day without really living. I saw Ryan at work. He was his usual self, laughing, joking, acting like he wasn't destroying my life. I wanted to punch him, to wipe that smug smile off his face. But I stayed quiet, pretending like nothing was wrong. It was torture, watching him so carefree, knowing he was the reason my world was falling apart. He talked about his weekend, about hanging out with some friends, his eyes sparkling with amusement. He was mocking me, I was sure of it, rubbing his betrayal in my face. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, drawing blood. I wanted to confront him, to make him pay for what he did. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed to figure out my next move, to decide how to handle this without losing everything. The hardest part was pretending with Sarah. Looking her in the eyes, smiling when she kissed me, acting like I didn't know she was lying with every word she said. It was killing me, piece by piece, tearing me apart from the inside out. I watched her more closely, noticing the little things I had ignored before. The way she glanced at her phone, the way she smiled when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she hummed to herself, lost in her own world. She was happy, happier than she had been in years. And it wasn't because of me. I felt like a stranger in my own life, a ghost haunting the remnants of a marriage that was already dead. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain she was causing me. But I was too afraid. Afraid of what she would say, of what she would admit. I was trapped, stuck in a limbo of lies and betrayal, unable to move forward or go back. I didn't know how to fix this, didn't know if I even could. All I knew was that the woman I loved was gone, and in her place was a stranger I didn't recognize. A stranger who was in love with my best friend. Part 4, Confrontation and Lies. The weight of the truth was suffocating, pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. Every day felt like a struggle to keep up the facade, to pretend that I didn't know my entire life was built on lies. I was drowning in it, the betrayal wrapping around me like chains, pulling me under. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I needed to hear her say it, to look me in the eye and tell me the truth, even if it destroyed me. I couldn't live in this limbo, trapped between suspicion and certainty, unable to move forward or let go. I rehearsed the conversation 100 times in my head, imagining every possible outcome. I pictured her denying it, crying, begging for forgiveness. I imagined her confessing, admitting she loved Ryan, that she had chosen him, that she was leaving me. I tried to prepare myself for the worst, but nothing could have braced me for the reality. It was a Friday night. She came home late again, her cheeks flushed, her hair slightly messy, her eyes sparkling with the joy she no longer shared with me. She looked beautiful, radiant even, and the sight of her made my heart ache. She was happy, just not with me. She didn't notice me standing in the living room, waiting in the dark. She kicked off her shoes, humming to herself as she walked into the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. It was so normal, so casual, like she hadn't just spent the night with another man. With my best friend. My hands were shaking, my chest tight with anger and pain. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Did you have fun tonight? My voice was cold, sharp, slicing through the darkness. She jumped, almost dropping the glass. Jesus, David. You scared me. She put a hand on her chest, laughing nervously. What are you doing sitting in the dark? I stepped forward, my eyes locked on hers. Did you have fun? I repeated, my voice low, steady. Too steady. She looked at me, confusion flickering across her face. Yeah, I did. It was just a girls' night. Nothing special. Her smile was forced, her eyes too wide, her body tense. She was lying. I felt my jaw clench, my fists curling at my sides. Who were you with? She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. You know, the usual. Kelly, Jess, the few of the girls from work. She looked away, taking a sip of water, her shoulders stiff. Liar. My chest tightened, the words bubbling up before I could stop them. I called Kelly tonight. She was home with her kids. Jess is out of town visiting her parents. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. You called them? Her voice wavered, just a little, but I heard the panic beneath it. I took another step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Why are you lying to me, Sarah? She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes flicking away, her hands trembling as she set the glass down. I didn't lie. I must have gotten the names mixed up. It was a last-minute thing. I didn't keep track of everyone who was there. The excuses were weak, pathetic, and they shattered the last thread of hope I was clinging to. She wasn't even trying to make it believable. She didn't respect me enough to come up with a decent lie. Stop, I said, my voice breaking. Just stop. I felt the tears burning in my eyes, my chest heaving with the effort to hold them back. I know, Sarah. I know everything. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with fear. What are you talking about? Her voice was small, fragile, a crack in the mask she had been wearing. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed through the room. Don't play dumb. I followed you. I saw you with him. I saw you with Ryan. Her whole body went rigid, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Her eyes were wild, darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. I felt my heart break all over again, seeing the truth written on her face. She was caught. She knew it. And she was terrified, not of losing me, but of losing the life she had built on lies. How long? My voice was barely a whisper, trembling with pain. How long have you been sleeping with him? She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes, her lip trembling. David, it's not what you think. I felt a surge of anger, my fists clenching so hard my nails dug into my palms. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. I saw you with him. I saw the way you looked at him. How long? She flinched, her shoulders sagging, the fight draining out of her. She looked away, her voice breaking. A few months. My knees buckled, and I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the couch to keep from falling. A few months. Months of lies, of betrayal, of pretending everything was fine while she was running to him behind my back. I felt sick, my stomach churning, while rising in my throat. Why? The word came out broken, choked with tears. Why him? Why my best friend? She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as she cried. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't plan it. It just happened. I was lonely, and he was there, and it felt good to be wanted again. Her words were like knives, cutting me open, tearing me apart. You were lonely? I was right here. I've always been here. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen, her face crumpled with guilt. You don't understand. We were drifting apart. We were just coexisting. I needed more. I needed to feel alive again. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the world spinning out of control. So you went to him? To Ryan? The one person I trusted more than anyone. She sobbed, her hands shaking. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want this to happen. But it did. And I don't know how to fix it. I stared at her, my chest hollow, my heart shattered. You can't. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. David, please. I'm so sorry. I never meant to. Stop. My voice was cold, dead. Just stop. I can't look at you right now. I turned away, my vision blurred, my chest tight. I felt like I was falling, my world collapsing around me. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with my heart, had betrayed me with my best friend. And there was no going back. I walked out the door, her sobs echoing behind me, the sound of my life falling apart. And I didn't look back. Part 5, the aftermath. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, numb and hollow, going through the motions without feeling anything at all. I didn't go home. I couldn't face her, couldn't bear to look at the woman who had ripped my heart out and shattered it at my feet. I stayed at a motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place people went to disappear. It was quiet, secluded, a perfect place to fall apart without anyone noticing. I spent the first night staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment, every lie, every touch that was meant for him. I could still see them together, their bodies close, their faces lit up with a happiness that no longer existed between us. I could hear her laugh, see her smile, feel the sting of her betrayal like a brand on my skin. It haunted me, taunting me with images I couldn't unsee, memories I couldn't erase. I tried to drown it out with whiskey, letting the burn numb the pain until I couldn't feel anything at all. But the numbness never lasted, and the ache would return, a gnawing void that swallowed me whole. I was broken, shattered beyond repair, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. On the third day, Ryan showed up. I heard the knock on my motel door, a sound that made my skin crawl, my chest tighten with rage. I knew it was him before I even opened the door. Who else would come looking for me? He stood there, his face drawn and pale, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. He looked like hell, but I couldn't find it in me to care. I wanted to hit him, to smash his face in, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused me. David, his voice was raw, broken. I'm so sorry, man. I never meant. I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that tasted like bile. You didn't want to hurt me? You slept with my wife. You lied to my face. You destroyed my life. But you didn't want to hurt me? He flinched, his shoulders sagging, his head bowed in shame. I know I messed up. I was stupid and selfish, and I ruined everything. But it just happened. I didn't plan it. I never wanted to betray you. I felt my fists clench, my body shaking with rage. It just happened. What? You tripped and fell into my wife. You don't accidentally destroy someone's life, Ryan. You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose to lie to me. You chose to sleep with her. You chose to take everything from me. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. I can't take it back. I can't fix it. But I need you to know. I hate myself for what I did. I hate who I became. I never wanted to lose you, man. You're my brother. I felt the anger twist inside me, white hot and searing. Don't you dare call me that. You're not my brother. You're not my friend. You're nothing to me. His face crumpled, his shoulders shaking as he sobbed. I watched him break down, but I felt nothing. No pity, no forgiveness. Only rage and pain. You took everything from me. I whispered, my voice cold and hollow. You took my wife, my marriage, my trust. You ruined my life. And for what? Was she worth it? Was it worth destroying everything we built? He shook his head, his eyes filled with anguish. No, it wasn't worth it. I'd give anything to take it back. I'd do anything to make it right. But I can't. I can't change what I did. I stared at him, the man I once trusted more than anyone in the world, the man who had stood by my side through everything, who had been a part of my family. And I realized he was gone. The person I thought I knew was dead, replaced by a stranger I didn't recognize. I never want to see you again, I said, my voice cold and final. We're done. Don't call me. Don't come looking for me. I don't care what happens to you. You don't exist to me anymore. He looked at me, his face crumpling, his eyes pleading. But I turned away, closing the door, shutting him out of my life for good. I sank to the floor, my body shaking, the anger fading, leaving only emptiness behind. I had lost everything. My wife. My best friend. My life as I knew it. And I didn't know how to go on. The days passed in a blur, each one bleeding into the next. I couldn't bring myself to go home, to face the ruins of my life. I didn't want to see the house where she had lied to me, where she had laughed with him, where she had pretended to love me while she was loving him. But I couldn't avoid her forever. She called me every day, left messages, sent texts begging me to come home, to talk to her, to let her explain. I deleted every one without listening, without reading. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, to see her words. Eventually, she showed up at the motel. I heard her voice at the door, soft and broken, pleading with me to let her in. David, please. I'm sorry. I miss you. I love you. Please just talk to me. I sat on the bed, my head in my hands, my chest tight with pain. I wanted to let her in, to wrap my arms around her, to believe that we could fix this, that we could go back to the way things were before. But I knew it was a lie. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't forget the way she looked at him, the way she smiled, the way she kissed him like he was her whole world. She didn't love me. Not anymore. Her voice broke, a sob escaping her lips. I'll wait for you. As long as it takes. I'll wait. I heard her footsteps fade away, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. I was alone, truly alone, and it was all her fault. But it was also mine. I had been blind, oblivious to the cracks forming in our marriage, too comfortable to see the distance growing between us. Maybe I could have saved us. Maybe I could have fought for her, for us. But it was too late. She was gone, lost to a man I once called my brother. I didn't know where to go from here, didn't know how to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. But I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The end.